is Pavandavra, and welcome to Precious Brain Lab, where we talk on brain disorders, brain development, and brain connectivity. In today's episode, we're going to understand about disability. Why is it so important to understand and learn about disability, and why is it that people are still having difficulties in relation to disability? Disability is just not, hands or legs are imputed, or physical, let's call it a physical or body disability or mental disability. Yes, there are. And because of all of this, now people are seriously having problems in, coping up with their mental health as well. So disability is not just about being physically disabled, but also by mentally disabled. And in today's episode, we're going to understand and unfold things on a deeper level, because disability is just not, it's just not visible to eyes. It's beyond that as well. Something that you cannot see, but still people lack in disability. And that is mental disability. But we're going to understand on both the ends why, and this is all important for all of us. Now, as you can see, a disability is any condition of the body or mind impairments that makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities or activity limitations and interaction with the world around them, participation restrictions. So the basic fundamental, as you can see in there, there are two pictures. As you can see, the child is actually having difficulty in learning, and then there is this a person sitting next to a computer, but unfortunately doesn't have any legs. So in these two conditions, you can see that one is having more of a mental disability, and the other one is having more towards physical disability. In both the conditions, there is one thing that is in common, that it is very difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities. How true is that? How commonly true is that? They both are two different things. Like I said, one has no legs, and the other one very, very difficult with their mind. To pick up things and to do things, it's very difficult for them as well. So one has a neurological, or let's say genetic defect, and the other one has a physical deficit, like leg imputed. So in both the conditions, the genetic has changed and drastically bring along a lot of changes in them. As they keep growing with life, the genetic will change with time. That's the truth about disability, that the genes are playing an important role in these two conditions. And because there are so many problems arise in day-to-day life, our genes are also changing drastically, especially after COVID-19. So even we are having difficulties in doing certain tasks, certain behaviors, and the most importantly, coping up with stress, which means we are still having certain type of disability which cannot be seen on the surface, but from the inside we are tearing apart. So as we come to this point of clear understanding that the disability having two types, one is the physical and the mental disability, then we get along and try and understand what are the types of disability that I want to talk about. And why is it important to talk on these disabilities? So let us find out. As you can see, that social disability, intellectual disability, autism disorder, neurofibromatosis type 2 genetic defect, this also brings up certain type of disability in the body after getting defect or by diagnosed by NF2 genetic defect. So you would see patients will struggle to keep up with their cognitive functions or maybe their motor functions deficit. They're going to find some sort of disability in NF2 genetic defect. Then comes the most important thing that the world is suffering from is productive thinking disability or codependency. This is the mostly vastly spread across the globe. Then comes self-harm damage to the brain. So when a person self-harm, even at point when they damage their brain, to the point that they damage their brain, so they have certain type of disability, especially if you say that they damage to their frontal cortex, the damage to their occipital lobe, like the back of their brain, and then I would say the top, the sides. They could damage any part of their brain. So that's important to understand that either the sides, the front, the back portion, or the top portion, especially when the person, let's say he committed suicide, he jumps from a building and now he damages the part of the brain. He survives, but the brain is damaged. So now he's suffering hard. Certain type of disability could be a physical or mental disability, or losing memory after the accident. Could be anything. So those categories also finds disability as well during self-harm. Then comes a part of damage to the frontal cortex leads to weakening of working memory. Now that's also a disability. When we talk on damage to the frontal cortex means, let's say you're driving a car and you meet with an accident. You damage the frontal cortex in that car. And now what happens is you're not able to perform well with a certain task given because your brain does not recognize those things that you're doing at the moment. Now, there are patients who have problems with their working memory, so they have another disability found there. Even when people who ride, bikes, even they damage their brain as well. So you would see in these conditions where the brain is seriously damaged. Now, when it comes to autism disorder, you would see that even they have damaged up to a certain limitation to their brain development, where there is a certain type of genetic defect found in autism children, and they're not able to balance their brain. They will have restrictions in their ability to process things in day-to-day life. It's very difficult for the parents to find adjustment with autism disorder children. And then comes intellectual disability. Very, very important to understand this. There are 4 types of the intellectual disability, but I'm not going to talk on those because that I will talk on a different section specialized on only intellectual disability, especially on the areas of schools, kids, old age, and genetic defects like autism. So that I'm going to keep it aside. We're going to have a different subject on that, where we're going to talk on these specific areas, why there is deficit in the old age and there is deficit in the younger age, and also in genetic defects like autism spectrum disorders. So all of these needs to be thoroughly understood in intellectual disability. Now, the basic fundamental of intellectual disability is mild, severe, and moderate intellectual disability. And also, genetic defect plays an important role in intellectual disability. Social disability, this is also another problem. This comes from a part of people who have dysfunctional family or didn't had a really good childhood. These people are maybe, let's say some kind of disorder develops by having drugs or taking a lot of alcohol. So there'll be a certain type of social disability found in this area as well. So when we talk on these terms of understanding the differentiations of the types of disorders, then we want to focus on just one part, which is very, very important. It's a lethal weapon. It is something that is infecting the brain of a lot of people. And it is very, very a serious problem that people should understand why people are having trouble in thinking well. Now from here, we're going to understand disability on a deeper level, because I want to make you realize that mentally disabled, not mentally challenged, let's say if a human being is normal, he doesn't have any genetic defect or mental disability, but they can also have disability, right? It's not just that you've got to have a mental disability, like, you have bipolar disorders or PTSD, or let's say you have borderline disorder. There's so many of them. MMD, major depressive disorder. There's so many of them. You just keep naming them. Let's say you don't have any of those. But there is something more common in human being, and that's what we're going to find out. Something common. But that is not a mental problem. That is something that we need to understand why this is all about. Do we have disability? Yes, we will have. Whether you have mental illness or you don't have, but you'll have this problem. Whether you're at a very young age, say about 15 years, 16 years of age, and if you take from there, then you can take it to up to 50 or 60 years of age, right from these two ages, between these two ages, let's say from 15 years to 70 years, 60 years, you will find this disorder pretty common. Sorry, not disorder, disability in common. What is this I want to talk about? So, as you can see, productive disability or codependency largely found in human beings. This is a very, very, very important thing to understand. Whether you have mental illness or you don't have, you will have this problem. And people face this problem at any certain given time. Not even one human being has gone past through this. Every human being has suffered productive disability or codependency. This comes with time. This is something that needs to be understood and valued. If you recognize this with time, then you can save yourself. And if you don't, then you'll suffer for a long time. So let us try and understand. It is a cycle inside the brain. The brain likes the idea of taking an easy pathway. This stimulus will have problems with thinking of productivity, and lesser synapses are found in the frontal cortex, weakening of PFC due to excessive release of dopamine. Major factor. Look at the picture. I put this picture because I want to show you those hands are tied up. That's because lack of productive disability and codependency, which means excessive release of dopamine, is found in the human beings. Why do I need to talk on this now? Let us try and understand on a deeper level. Let's say, as a human being, we have this frontal cortex. Every human being has something to do with their lives. They have to utilize this frontal cortex to its maximum. But as a human being, we use it very little. We use more of dopamine that spikes in us and makes us believe that this is how the life should be. And it is pretty common because I can understand that we are surrounded by movies, music, you go out to the market, you're going to find places to eat. We have, cafeterias, we have bars, we have, shopping. There's so many things to do. And we're spiking those neurochemicals without even understanding. This is a very intellectual, neurochemical. It's very intelligent. It is intelligently orchestrated inside our system, which is the human being system. Why? Because if we go way back in time, let me try and make you understand everything from here on. We did not know about dopamine. Please try to understand. All we knew was we should do certain activity and we're going to feel good about it. That's it. But as time progressed, the exposure to food, entertainment, and releasing of chemicals that gives pleasure from libido, the base of the brain, the libido that releases. Because of this, people start to recognize that how to pull people, especially businesses like shopping, clothes, food, and then you could call it bakeries, cars, houses. So they had a rough idea that if we do this certain type of thing, then people are going to get attracted. So they didn't know about dopamine, but they knew how people are going to get attracted. That attraction brought the science into the play to understand why people are getting attracted because of dopamine. Last video I talked about the mesocortical limbic system responsible for cravings, dopamine. And that's where the whole gumbo jumbo of this science began, where people started to get attracted to anything and everything. And the most important thing was the introduction to porn industry. That's where the largely people started to behave in a certain manner, and it was a boom. Billions and billions of dollars people earned from porn industry because of the spike of dopamine. This is a very intelligent orchestrated. Now at this age, we've got this gift to understand what this thing can do. Because we are spiking this dopamine, we are getting non-productive every day. We're using, let's say this is the limbic system and this is the prefrontal cortex. During the daytime, we use a lot of limbic system and a very little of prefrontal cortex. Very little. So the gap is big between the limbic system, which is on top, and the bottom is prefrontal cortex. So when we do a little task, 20% prefrontal cortex is used. Then after a couple of hours, boom, we try to use a lot of limbic system to kind of distract ourselves. Very little prefrontal cortex, and then we blast it with limbic system. So the non-productivity is actually increasing in people's brain. Productivity is reducing with time, and people are increasing the part of the limbic system dominance over the prefrontal cortex. And this is where large people are getting distracted every now and then. And when there is something that needs to be taken care of, people start to fall back. They will reach out to other people, or they'll reach out to some people and say, oh, please help me. Or I'll go to this saintly person. He's going to give me an advice what to do. Why? Because we're not using a prefrontal cortex. We are intelligent. I'm telling you, we're intelligent. But because we're not made in such a way that we're supposed to use our limbic or our prefrontal cortex, we're just using our limbic system. That's it. And very little of the neocortex, or to understand how to make a decision or how to be productively thinking. How? This is a major deficit found in human beings. Now, when we get to this point, we're going to understand on a deeper level from here on that what are the critical things that actually hides from being productive? What are those things that we don't really pay attention to, or we overly do it? Either we will not do it, either we'll overly do it. What are those things? Let us try and understand. So as you can see, there is this frontal cortex, and you would see that there is this thing that I've listed. The most important thing that today's world is money, career, healthy eating, exams, discipline, learning and memorizing, and savings. These are very, very critical things that people need to think about. This is where people are running away from. Why do they run away from these things? The first thing is, the most important thing from here to understand why. We know dopamine, but now we'll understand why. Due to high release of cortisol when productive thinking, the brain gets stressed out and triggers the part of the amygdala. This results in poor thinking or negative thinking and wanting to reach out to a person. This cycle is known as productive disability. Now we try to understand from here why this thing is important to learn. We all know about productivity, right? But do we understand productivity on a deeper level? And why is it important to understand cortisol as the most insane hormone that if you don't use it in the right way, then we're going to suffer hard? This is neuroscience, and we're going to talk deep on something called as HPA Axis, which is related to cortisol. I want to make it very simple for you to learn about these disabilities and try and make it the most of it and make it easier for you. So if cortisol is responsible for all of this, then what can we do to improve our condition? One is dopamine and the other one is cortisol. These two things keep us in that cycle. So as you can see, that prefrontal cortex lesser synapses happens. This is how the cycle works. Lesser synapses happens due to hypothalamus activity and pituitary gland activity. Then excessive release of cortisol increases fear in us, pressure builds up within prefrontal cortex, increases probability unresolved issue. When the pressure builds up within prefrontal cortex, you would notice that either you're going to have headaches, or either you're going to just sweat a lot, either you're going to You'll lay down and you'll try to close your eyes and sleep or run away from that place. When the pressure builds up, you're not in that place. You want to run away from that place. You don't want to just, be there. You want help. You want that emotional relief of taking a help from somebody. Cortisol is something that is very, very intelligently put into us because it gives us a sign of fight or flight response. But if fight and flight response, then why this cortisol is making it so difficult for us to understand? Why is that brain does not understand that there is no danger out? And even if there is something productivity to think about, we tend to pressure our brain more, and then we do more, and we don't think right, and we make it worse out of it. Why does we do all of this then? Then we need to understand all of this is right. So let us try and understand more deeper about this cortisol and try and solve this in a very simple way to understand how this can be resolved. So as you can see, cortisol, like testosterone, is a steroid hormone. Cortisol is known primarily for its role in the physiological stress response via activation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is HPA axis. The HPA axis consists of a series of communication between the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the adrenal glands. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, increases sugar glucose in the bloodstream, enhances your brain's use of glucose, and increase the availability of substance that repair tissues. Cortisol also curbs functions that would be non-essential or harmful in a fight or flight situation. But this doesn't happen that way. What is happening in today's world is, if you've seen that picture, that the hypothalamus, then comes the cycle where you would see that the pituitary gland, then comes the adrenal gland, then comes the cortisol, and then it gets back to the hypothalamus. So you would see the release of cortisol. This is the stress response system that goes inside our system, from pituitary gland to the hypothalamus, from the adrenal gland, then cortisol release, and then gets to the hypothalamus. This is the reality of cortisol. But then what happens is, let us try and understand even more from here. You must have seen, everybody must have seen in the movies or somewhere, a snake, isn't it? If you see a snake in front of you, what's going to happen? You're going to freak out. You're going to just freak out. You don't want to touch the snake, and you just want to, just stay away from it. That is cortisol. It's just releasing, and it's trying to defend. It's just trying to protect you. But that's the reality of cortisol. But what are we doing in productive disability is, whenever you think productive, people who are weak in thinking, they release excessive release of cortisol. There is no danger. There is nothing. But they're releasing that cortisol, and they're increasing they're decreasing productivity. They're blocking the prefrontal cortex, and that's where the real trouble is. People don't realize that the cortisol should not be released in such manner. The cortisol should be released when there is something that it's going to be dangerous for you. But that doesn't happen that way. People are releasing for anything and everything. That's because they think a constant fear. Why? Somatic sensory. Well, the biggest thing. Somatic sensory. The senses, they're going down. Eyes, ears. I will talk on the vision. the neuroscience of vision on a future videos, that how this is the biggest deception of human being. How this is a deception. How? I will explain you everything on that video, future video. I'm working on it. I'll come up with that as well. So eyes, ears, the sound is the biggest. The biggest is the sound. Because the sound, cortisol triggers. More than the eyes, the ears. You hear something and boom, it triggers. So you release the excessive release of cortisol. So that's another thing that happens when you release cortisol in productive thinking. Imagine you're thinking about money and you're freaking out. You're just thinking. And then something you hear about the money inside of you. Now the cortisol is releasing a lot. Excessive. The body gets into tremendous stress and you want to just run away, do something. Your head is hurting you a lot. You want to drink. You want to go and talk to somebody. That's because there's a disability in your productive thinking, and that need to be understood. That also leads to codependency. So this needs to be understood, that excessive release of cortisol can damage your frontal cortex. I wouldn't say like severe damage. Damage means it will deficit you in productive thinking. Not physical damage to the brain, but mentally you're damaging your brain by not thinking productively. You're basically moving towards non-productive things. Then why do we always have to think about this, that it's non-productive things? Then there is something more to it to understand, right? If there is something to it, then there is certain criteria of productive disability. You're engaging into non-productive thinking. Why? Why can't you think productive thinking? Why? So, as you can see, productive disability is also due to overprotective parents in the childhood, dysfunctional or abusive family during the childhood, genetic defects during the childhood or at the young age. You must have faced something and there was a change in your genetics. Then comes fear conditioning, then comes emotional dysregulation, and then comes addictions. These are the fundamentals of productive disability. These are the foundation of productive disability. If these things you're experiencing, then productive disability is on the high rise. Let's say if the parents one of the parents are really, really aggressive towards children, then the child won't be able to think right. They will have this productive disability with time, and they won't be able to cope up with things. And that's where the real challenge is. Even autism, spectrum autism disorder, what happens to the child? You must have experienced it. Parents with autism children, or if they go to the school, or let's say counseling or psychiatric department, they know about it, that how difficult it is for them to cope up with things. You have to literally make them understand about things and teach about every little thing that they do. It's very difficult to teach an autism child, but I will come up with something that's going to be beneficial for the mental care department. I'm working on the last few things on autism to make it easier to have a better cognition towards autism child, how they can be benefited by having parents and having counseling department and teachers. How can they benefit the child? Because of all of this that we understood now, that these are the challenges that you face to have productive disability, then there are many things on the surface that we also need to understand how to benefit, how to enhance the productivity in us as well. So that is also important from here on. But like I said, autism is a great challenge, and I will come up with that video. I want to share a part of my little contribution towards autism children as well. But it's going to be in terms of neuroscience, nothing to do with the mental care department. That's a different thing. They have a different assessment, different way to deal with them. But I'm going to talk on deeper level on the genetic part of it, downright deep, how this all happens to the autism from inside. So it's going to be an eye-opening. Wait for it. I'm going to come up with it. And that video is going to be long. It's going to be seriously long. It's not going to be like 30 minutes or 40 minutes video, because there's so many things to cover in autism that every section has so many things to talk on. I cannot just cut and make it no. I have to make it big. So I'm deciding how to do it. So let's get along further now. Enough of autism for now. So let's get back to the productive disability. What actually happens when we want to understand productive disability on a deeper level? What can we do more beyond this now? Let us try and understand. So as you can see, why does phantom limbs happen? What is phantom limbs? So you can see that the person is sitting on the couch. He doesn't have a leg. The leg is imputed. So when the physical damage happens, what happened to the body part? When a body part is imputed, the nerve connections from the periphery to the brain remain in the place. The brain can misinterpret the information it's receiving or process the signals as the sensation of pain, even if the imputed portion has since been removed. So they still feel the sensations. Let's say my hand, right? This is my hand. You can see my hand, right? So I'm going to block my hand now. Imagine my hand is imputed. I have no hand. I have only one hand. One hand is out. So the connectivity to the brain and the hand. So from here to this hand right here, there is a connection happening. What is that? Primary motor function. It's sending the signals to everywhere. So imagine one day I meet with an accident and my hand is imputed. When I wake up, my hand is gone. So when I wake up, the brain is sending that signal down, but failing to connect. So what happens? It reroutes, which means the brain sending the signal here. Now the brain is sending the signal from here to here. Sorry, from here to here. So as the person moves one hand, the left hand, now imagine he's holding something. He forgets that he doesn't have another hand. So when he tries to move this hand like this, then he reminds of he doesn't have this hand. So the sensation hits here. That's phantom limp. Tickling sensation or pain sensations that's found here. Why that thing happened here is because the cells are still active. The sensation, the cells, they're activated to pass from here to here. They're still there. Only the hand is gone, which means that they can still activate their hands, which means the thing is not dead. Imagine blind. I'll give another example, blind. Imagine the blind, born with blind. They're blind, they cannot see. How do they perform? They use their hand receptors. When they touch something, there's an image created in the brain. How cool is that? The eyes is not everything. Please try to understand. The eyes is gone, but the occipital lobe is still active. It's sending the signal to the brain. Round about here, they can feel and imagine what that thing is. If this thing is cut off, they cannot understand what they're holding. They'll get confused. So the physical thing that damages is not everything. The system is still working inside. It's not dead. So why do I need to put this imagination, this representation, the last one, is because I want to make you understand any disability, or let's say autism spectrum disorder, or a normal person, I'll start with autism. If the autism children are born with genetic defects, it doesn't mean they don't have any cells here. They do have those cells. Now understand this. Let's say if a person with a disabled human being has a phantom limp, which means the hand is gone and they feel a lot of pain, what does the doctor do? I want to activate that cell again. What will I do? I will use an artificial hand or leg, and I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on that, that functionality of that hand. I will force the hand to work. So when I force the hand, what happens? I'm forcing it now. What happens? The connection is happening from brain to the hand. And as they keep repeating that, the phantom limb, the pain is gone. The connectivity starts again. It's reroute and it's getting to the hand. So what happens in autism is, I'll give a simple thing to do. If they contribute to learning and memorizing 60%, then we use a tool of force mechanism to concentrate on what they're doing. If they go under 50% of what they're contributing in learning and memorizing, it's going to be very difficult for learning and memorizing, which means you cannot help them. You need to try another way to get them to the stage where you can use forced mechanism to activate the cell of prefrontal cortex. So how do you do all of that? I'll explain in that video. But this is what it is, a basic fundamental I'm giving you right now. Now, when it comes to normal human being, then they need to actively force this area to work. People who have problems in thinking, productive thinking, they should be given tasks like crosswords, tasks like simple tasks, making decisions, force them to do it, like making a decision on buying a shirt, making a decision on their own on buying certain things or eating certain food. Let's say they go to a restaurant, make them sit, but let them do what they are supposed to do. When they make a decision, then you can help them. If it is right or wrong. If it is right, then you encourage them to do more, to think, to get to that stage where they can independently think that this is the right thing. Forced mechanism. You got to force them to think in that direction. That's where the activity of this region will increase and dopamine and the other part is going to reduce. That's where the cortisol is going to start to reduce. The anxiety will settle down as this will increase. This is what we want from people to do when they get into these kind of, problems. Productive disability can be improved with forced mechanism right here. This is what we need to improve. Like I said, crosswords. Crosswords, why? Because they start to think. Executive functioning. It's very, very effective tool, crosswords. Let them think, let them enhance. Crosswords are the best way to enhance the executive functioning. Then comes, like I talked on, the other part is make them decisions to small things, buying clothes, watches, or eating food. Let them try and make a decision, and then you improve them. But don't stop them while they're making a decision. Patiently wait, let them do it. Let them force that part. You've got to force it. Don't give them, stay calm, and you can think, no. Just tell them, you've got to think it now. I want the answer. You've got to force it. If you just keep it like that, it's not going to work. Force means there'll be no options left. One option is only thinking. That's where the enhancement of prefrontal cortex will increase. This is how you need to improve it. So I'm going to end here now. I told you I'll come back with autism as well. You'll get to know in the later videos. I'm working on it, the representations. It's never easy to do with all of this. It's very difficult, but I love challenges and I want to make the most of it for the people out there. I want to give you that abundant life. I want to make it happen. I want to give you that life that does not require a lot of medications. You can do it on your own. I want to empower you with a lot of light and abundance inside of you. And that's the passion that I have in me, is neuroscience. I will do it for you. I will come up with video and I'll make that life an abundant life for you. Happy life. That's all I want. So please, please, please smile. My last word. Please put out that smile on your face. The world around you should be beautiful and happy and sweet. For that, you need to work from inside to make that happen outside. So, your mental health is important to your family. God bless you all, and may you have an abundant, sweet life. Sending you so very much love, light, and healing. Hare Krishna.